All right. Thank you everybody for coming to the meeting tonight, and especially welcome to our visitors who are, I'll introduce you in a minute, but these are all people who have agreed to run for the board for next year. So that'll happen in my election update. So welcome everybody. I'm going to officially call the meeting to order. And just a reminder to everybody, we're going to go through the agenda. And then at the end of the agenda, I'll ask the visitors to leave and the board will go into executive session at that point, and I will pause recording so we don't record that. So that'll be the process that we use for the executive session. So, okay. So yes, welcome everybody. We're called to order. The first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from the June meeting. Julia took the minutes and then sent them to Valerie, and then Valerie attached the treasure stuff to it. So, and sent that out. Did anybody have any corrections or updates to the minutes? Nope, seeing some shaking heads. Okay. So, in light of that, I would welcome a motion to,
I
oh,
will.
Deb.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from June, the last meeting.
Okay, so Deb made a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Carrie seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes from the June meeting, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Valerie and Julia. All right. Debbie, treasurer's report.
Hi, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. See if I can. There we go. Okay, I do want to start with the balances here, right here. Cash balances, these were sent out there. So if you compare these to before, they're comparable, no big changes. The checking account's a little lower than it has been. It's still, obviously, you can see it's not low. We have had many race expenses in the last month or two, and those will still continue. But as we go into the fall, then we'll even have more registrations for autumn leaves, turkey trot. And so the race numbers here, I gotta move my, okay, so the race numbers over here, these, you can see that we're still have incoming expenses from, let's see, maybe Dual and Pumpkin Ridge. We'll have some more coming in from those, but the ones at the top are set. Oh, except we have just a few late ones coming in from Hag Mud lately. So we'll put those in there and that should be fine. As you can see, we've got a good amount of registrations even for autumn leaves and turkey trot, even though they're so far away. And if we switch over to, hold on, that. If we switch over to the budget, where are we? I guess, well, I'm going to go back to the other. It's the same, but I can't see. Sorry, one moment here. Ah, oh no, my screen just went out. Oh my word.
Oh no, we still see it.
My computer. Oh, there it came back. Oh my gosh.
Okay. It's like we can see.
It's on the blink. It's on the fritz. It there's a little something in it that makes it go on and off. I need a new computer, but it hasn't done that for a long time. Okay, back to the race and back to, I know I'm embarrassing. To the budget numbers here from expenses. First, we didn't have many more expenses through just our general spending, except where we ordered flags through Jeff Wehrman. We ordered the flags there, so that kind of put us over on the equipment and supplies, but that's what it's there for, is to buy what we need. And as you saw in the beginning with the cash balances, we do have good reserves. So when we do need something, we are able to purchase that. We're right on track mostly with, we're a little over on some of these things, the professional fees. But again, we have plenty to back up this. And in the end of the day, the race numbers so far, where I was right here, even though our income is right now ahead of our expenses, we expect even more income to be ahead of even more expenses with the turkey trot, just like last year. We're projecting that that's going to be just right, and we haven't lost a lot of money with the races at all. And so, kind of keeping with our goal of giving community activity, community events that don't cost a lot of money and don't cost the club a lot of expense either. Does anyone have any questions about any of this?
Two things. One, did you say there's still money coming from our expenses from Hag Mud? Missed it. Sorry.
Yeah, there were a few from Deb just gave to me that were a little bit late coming in. So
okay, no problem. And then I noticed on the overall P&L that we made some good interest this year.
From the market has been up and down, so that's what's going on with that. So yes, we've been doing well with that. Once we, that's been doing well.
So the one thing, Kim Kovacs is not here, and the one thing that I think that we need to maybe, and I don't know, we may need to help with this, but Tracy will recall that on the rental for Dual, her race did not get the nonprofit pricing. And so I think that we need to follow up with her to make sure, because it's a sizable difference between, so Pumpkin Ridge is getting the nonprofit price, Dual is also renting a school facility. And so I don't know if that's in process, but that's a few $100s that I think that we need to follow up on. And I can ask her about it if you want, but I don't know if she's had an opportunity to reach out to the school to ask to address that. The school would owe us a reimbursement.
There was an email thread, right? And we're still kind of in the middle of that, but I'm not able to pay without links. So we'll go back to that email thread. After.
Kim may not know how to go about. I don't want to underestimate Kim. I don't know if she's had to deal with that before. The Pumpkin Ridge is paid for, but I was just in there earlier today and it still looks like it's that original pricing. So I just don't want to lose sight of that somewhere. That's something we can probably do here in the next month or so. But I think it's going to require requesting a reimbursement from.
Yeah. And she might do that after Dual is over.
Yeah.
And just to let all race directors or assistant race directors, everyone know that if a race will invoice us or need us to pay by, a debit card or any other thing, they can contact the treasurer directly if a person doesn't want to spend their own money and be reimbursed. That's perfectly normal. Cool. Anything else? Okay.
No, that's all great. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about on the discussion topics was an update on the waiver review. And Carrie and I have been working on that. Carrie kind of wrote up something based on the RRCA template. And then I contacted the Center for Nonprofit Law, which is our attorney of record for the club, and asked if they would take a look at it. It was going to be $250 per hour. So they said they'd be happy to do it for us. We were specifically asking them, we didn't want to change the template too much, and we were hoping to make it one waiver for both volunteering and participants, so we just have one generic waiver. But we specifically wanted them to look for Oregon state specific things that needed to be included in the waiver. They got back to us and they separated it out to two separate waivers and made it super long and legal, and it's all legal, I should say, legalese and terminology and stuff, and it just was kind of overwhelming. They did not add anything. Yeah. They didn't put anything specific to the state of Oregon in the waiver. They just kind of rearranged and reworded our RCA template. So we were going to talk about it, and we think we're just going to go with the RRCA template because I think since there's nothing Oregon specific that they said we needed to include in it. The main thing is with the waivers is that once we get them created, we think they do need to include like counties and cities for each specific race. Mm-hmm. So the main thing that RDs would need to consider is if they're moving their event to a different location, they need to change the waiver to be specific to that. And the only event that really moves is dual. So
Right. Sure.
I think that's what Carrie and I are going to kind of move forward on, create one that's for both. We'll work on that after I get back from traveling and not worry about. And so we'll pay the center for the work they did on the initial review and then just say, thanks, we're going to go with our.
Yeah, we can just thank them for the work that they did, and then we don't have to tell them what we ultimately end up with. I think that the process lets us feel comfortable that somebody in a legal capacity looked at the waiver, and we can feel comfortable using the template that our CA currently has out there. But yes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Just an update for that. Now, a new proposal. This came from Eb Engelman, and I just thought it was a great idea. He emailed me. Some of you know Eb Engelman has been a member for a long time, participates in lots of things, and he emails back and forth. But he is 85, 84, something like that. And he emailed me to let me know that he was not going to be able to renew his membership because he was having health issues and he couldn't participate anymore, and he just didn't see paying membership dues for nothing. And he emailed and said, do you have anything like emeritus membership for longtime members who, are getting older and have participated, but, something like that. And I said, well, no, we don't, but let me think about it. And so Julie and I looked it up, and that's why that email went out to all the members about when did your membership start? Because we moved to run sign up. We moved the whole membership database to run sign up. So the only dates we had were when we moved the database in 2016, 2017. We knew people had been members for years before that. So we thought of an idea for anybody who is, two ideas. The first one was anybody who's 80 or older who has been a member for more than 10 years.
No.
And give them emeritus membership so that they would have similar to like a lifetime membership, but they don't have to have volunteered or anything. They just were longtime members and they're getting older, and we want them to enjoy the benefits of the club without having to pay for it because of their loyalty to the club. So we looked it up, and we had people who were 80 plus in the database that were current members.
Right.
We had 26 of them. And then the tricky part, because they're probably not all alive. So we were Googling everybody's names to see, and we did find a couple who had passed away. But basically that's what we wanted to do, is send out that email to find out were they members for 10 years or longer. So that's kind of what we're researching right now. So that's the proposal. I just kind of wanted to see what you guys thought of that. Unmute yourselves.
Oh, we should make it 90. No, I'm just kidding.
This is Mark T. So can we do a combination? Like if there's 70 and been with the club for 10 years, so make it like 80, a total of 80 years combined, like with their age and then their membership. So if you're like 55, but you've been with the club for 25 years, that would make it 80.
That'd be hard to track.
I'm just saying, because I would qualify for that.
Yeah, you'd qualify. Well, this will be an incentive for those who are getting up there to stay members and stay kind of, there with the idea that they could become emeritus members if they stayed longtime members. We also thought of 75 and older but that was 63 members. Our club's members tend to skew a little older. And so we have a lot of 70-year-old members. So we thought 80 would be a good incentive to get people still going, even if they were, no longer.
80 in 10 years is a good record. I mean,
I think so too. Yeah. I like the 80 in 10 years.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
So are you thinking like a free membership, or are you thinking like a discounted membership?
Free. It would be like giving them lifetime membership for the rest of their lives.
At that age, they can have it free, I think.
So if we did this, we would, is not 26, it would be
Yeah,
less
we
than
already
that.
knocked it out. Yeah.
It'd be less than that. But if we did, initially we might have a group of like 20 that we would give emeritus member. And then each year we would look through and add people who have turned 80 and been 10 years at that point.
Well,
So initially there'd be a large number, and then there would be fewer added given that status as we go on. Joe?
If you can get to 80 and you've had 10 years of historical membership, you more than well deserve that free membership like for the rest of your days, as far as I'm concerned.
Great. Susan?
I agree with that.
Joel agrees with that. Okay. Susan? You're muted. Sorry.
So 80 seems like a fairly advanced age to me, but how many members did you say would qualify right now that were 80 or older?
Initially on the list of 80 plus current members, we had 26. Now, not all of them are still alive. Are 10 years, not
Right.
or still alive. Yeah. So we think between some of them just joining and some of them no longer being around, there probably will be fewer
Right.
than that.
I guess from my perspective, thinking about the club as a whole, and thinking about walkers and runners, and thinking about my family, and I have 6 older brothers that are all like in their 70s to 80. I think 80 is too old. I think I would do 75, but that's just where I'm coming from.
I like that.
Joe likes 75.
That's a good proposal.
So I would also say that if you look at some of our volunteers, some of the members that are not necessarily walking and running, but in those age groups, they switch over to be volunteers, and we want to encourage that. We actually need them.
It's true.
We need them.
Okay.
And I don't have any vested interest. I'm not 75.
Be okay with 75 though. I mean, that's to have 75 plus is still impressive if they want to be engaged and they're wanting to be members. That's great.
Joel?
I would even say that I'd say 75. And I mean, personally, I don't have any real strong inclination on the 10 years of previous participation. I would just say 75 and previously, in good standing with the club. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that having more participants in that age group that are still volunteering and getting out there, I think it's a great idea.
Valerie?
I agree with the 75 and what Carrie was saying. When you get, a little older, you tend to, you might participate in a couple races, but you volunteer more typically than actually participate. So I think it's a great reward for people.
Yeah.
So what do we think
involved? Yeah.
What do we think about the 10-year versus no?
Deborah? Deb?
Do we even have a senior membership rate for people over 65?
We have a student discount, but up to 24, 26, I believe, but we don't have a senior one.
Just because we have so many older members that everybody, half the population would get a discount.
Yeah.
So what do we think of the non-10-year, don't bother with the 10-year or have a 10-year?
I tend to like the 10 years simply because it rewards those who have been in the club, even if they haven't been volunteering, but they've been members for that long. It means they're kind of dedicated to it versus I worry somebody would, I want people to join our club, but I don't want us to suddenly say, hey, if you're 75, you can join for free and we'll get this influx of people without, not that we're giving away a whole bunch of stuff for free to people, but
Hey, that electronic newsletter is really popular.
yeah.
Could we modify it so it's 75 or 75 and older and 10? So someone, say they join when they're 70, so when they turn 80, they could qualify. Does that make sense?
That's kind of what Mark was saying before.
Oh, okay.
I think if we just make it simple, base it on one birthday, once you turn 75 and you've been
10 years, just leave it that way. So,
leave it
yeah,
that.
the tracking would be difficult.
And we can always adjust it if we decide we want to encourage others, but. Okay, so.
I'm good with 75, 10 years.
Yeah, I'm 75, 10 years, but the 10 years, it doesn't have to be continuous, right? They could have a break, they 5 years, then drop for a couple of years, then read.
There's no way for us to track.
There's no way for us to track that. We can see a start date and we can kind of see continuous, but I think it would be hard to do in and out and in and out.
Kind of just honor system then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Joel?
Response when you sent out that email, out of curiosity, what kind of response did you get?
We had 96 responses.
Okay.
Wow.
Joel?
I mean, I'm happy with either. I mean, I feel like I'd even say 5 years. I mean, I can't imagine that it's that many people. And I mean, the more people that we could get in, I think it's cool, you know, but I'm happy with whatever.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go with 75 and 10 years. That will start. The starting list is 63. We'll have to do some research. I'm sure that'll pare it down. And then we'll just add people each year as they turn 75 if they've been there within 10 years or longer. And we'll put something in the newsletter to let people know. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Next up, board election update. I'm so thrilled to have so many of you visiting the board meeting tonight. Thank you so much. First of all, Mark Takazawa and Valerie Pratt, we're going to be running for re-election, but they are both stepping down from the board at the end of December. So they will not be on the election ballot. Carrie will be on the ballot. And then we have 6 people who have contacted me saying they'd be interested in serving on the board. Some of them I reached out to, some of them contacted me directly. So I'm thrilled with all of you. And they are Cynthia Esparza, Henrin Johnston, Donald Raymond, Yasmin Brandon, Nancy Fisher, and Suzanne Ryerson. So, and I know a bunch of you are here tonight, so welcome and thank you for considering doing this. Do you guys want to introduce yourself? So just briefly to the meeting, or you don't have to if you don't want to. I don't want to put pressure on you. Why don't we start Penrin, why don't we just start with you?
Hi, yeah, sure. I'm Penrin. I don't know what else to say, but hi, Penrin.
All right, I'm going to toot Penrin's horn, and I'm going to say that for 2 years in a row, she's handed out the socks and greeted finishers at Hag Mud, and I very much appreciated it. Smile at the end of the race.
I love handing out the socks.
Awesome. Let's try Suzanne.
I'm Suzanne. Running's relatively new to me in life. I'd say I started running 10 years ago, and my first 10K was I don't know the name of it, on the Greenway in Tigard.
Oh yeah.
My first 10K race was there, and then I just keep adding distances, and I do probably more trail runs than road runs, but I run and volunteer as much as I can.
Awesome. Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy, and I've been running about 18 years and have been a member of this amazing organization for most of that time. And yeah, I really love all the giving back to the community. I like to race, and I also love to volunteer with this group. So right now, my right knee says, how about more volunteering than running? So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I just learned about the Oregon Road Running Club because of such affordable prices, and all the other prices that I've looked at for the races they just keep on going up, whereas I think that you guys are very affordable, as well as like very inclusive, like very generous with the ending times, like if somebody chooses to walk, which I really appreciate. I've been running for probably about 10 years, and I've done like a bunch of different ones because I'm born and raised in Oregon and lived in Portland. So I've done, I think, probably all of the races in some capacity. Yeah, but I'm excited to just get involved because of just the motto that you guys hold. It's very, very kind to all levels.
Awesome. Thank you. Yasmin.
Hello, I'm Yasmin, and when I volunteer, I love folding the t-shirts when folks are getting their bibs. I'm just like a little OCD, I'm guessing. And then this Saturday, I'm going to do my first half marathon. I've said my entire life I'm never going to do a half marathon, and I'm going to be running down Mount Rainier.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Good luck. sounds hard on the knees for me.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming to the meeting tonight and for volunteering to run on the board. I've been in contact with you to collect bios and photos and stuff like that. So no hurry because that's not until November, December, but just wanted to welcome you and looking forward to working with you, joining the team. With Valerie stepping down, just everybody think about it. You don't have to worry about it now because she's not leaving until the end of December, but we will need a new secretary for the board. Think about if you'd be up for doing the secretary role at some point, you guys. So, and Julie does not want to do it. So, also, just really quickly, just some of you may have noticed the newsletter. We have two newsletters that go out each month. One is the race results newsletter, and one is the newsletter with articles and features and stuff like that. And for June, we had two race results newsletters because what we were doing is the race results was in the middle of the month, and then the newsletter, the article newsletter was at the end of the month. And what we want to do is change it. So the newsletter article would be in the middle. So we actually did two results newsletters. The next one coming out this week is going to be the article. Come out tomorrow morning. And then it'll be middle of the month will be the newsletter with articles. End of the month will be the results newsletter. So just a quick shift, just in case any of you noticed that, hey, where was the newsletter last month? We moved it around a little bit. So let's see. Event dates, just a reminder, I've got confirmed dates for most of our events. I think we just still need to figure out Best Damn Run and on Autumn Leaves and Dave's Solstice. So, but that's Randy and Eric. So otherwise, we're good on that. The main reason we need to get that updated, that has to be finalized at our next month's meeting. So the August meeting is when we're going to be finalizing our event calendar for 2027, because then we have to get the information to order the coaster, magnet, whatever we decide. I think we're going to try the calendar that goes to all members and also to the expos. We have to get that submitted by early September, so we have it by early October for the Portland Marathon Expo. To give you an update on the coasters, we were not happy with the coasters last year. The coaster we originally approved looked good, but then they didn't, it wasn't oriented properly. So we said, you need to reprint it. They redid it with a different supplier and they used different color. And I say a different font. They said it was the same font, but you couldn't read it. So we've reached out to, that was through GC, are the people who do our mailings for us. We're going to go to Oregon Screen Impressions, who has done a lot of our other stuff like coasters and cups and things like that. And we've asked them if they can do coasters, which we've seen some of their coasters. We know they can do them. And we gave them pictures of what we wanted and what we ended up with. And they said, oh, we can work with this. We talked about having, instead of it being white letters on blue, it's going to be white background with blue letters, so it's easier to read. So hopefully it'll be much better. We're going to give it a second shot. If it doesn't work again, then we'll give up on the coasters and we'll do something else. But I know it can work. We just need to find the right supplier to do it. So,
and we're doing coasters. There's no opportunity for magnet. I like magnet.
Yeah, I like the magnets too. I think there was a lot of issues with sustainability, and coasters you can keep and reuse, and the magnets are just one use. And yeah, I love the magnets, but
all right, go coasters.
Yeah. But if the coasters don't work this year, then we'll try something else, and we might go back to magnets. Who knows?
But the coasters get wet, and then you can't read them. So,
well, it depends on the kind that we get.
Okay.
If we got we're going for the pulp board, not the paper ones.
Oh, okay.
So they're a little bit heavier duty than the paper ones. Not So we're working on that. We just got to finalize the dates. Okay, we already talked about the volunteer waivers check-in form. We did that last month, didn't we, Carrie? Do we need to update everybody on that? I know we did it at the RD meeting. I don't remember if we did it last month's meeting.
On it. I mean, I think everybody's aware that we've updated the waiver. We did have an RD meeting. We presented it in a little bit more detail. if you are an RD that was not able to be at the meeting and you've not seen the emails with all the documentation, if you have questions, let me know. I'll walk you through the process. And just for those that are new to the call, the whole issue around waivers is a liability issue and making sure that we are complying with our requirements because we're part of the National Roadrunners Club of America, and we're tightening our process to make sure that our waivers comply with the requirements of our insurance program through Roadrunners Club of America. So I'll leave it at that. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help.
Okay. And leading into that, our events recap. We had the race director meeting at the end of June, and I thought it went really well. Carrie presented the waivers to everybody. We talked about the volunteers and the group processes. We confirmed some dates. We met at Cornelius Pass Roadhouse, and it went really well. There was 9 of us, 10 of us. I forget. We were pretty crowded around that table, but it went pretty well. And then Mark forwarded a lot of the attachments and information. We went over the definition of race directors, co-race directors, super volunteers, and just volunteers. So everybody would know that, and assistant directors. So it was a good meeting. I think people were pretty happy with that. Yeah. Anybody here who was attended, did that kind of cover it? I know.
Yes, agree.
Yeah. Okay. Dave's solstice went really well, I thought. A bunch of us were there. We were volunteering. What were the final numbers?
It was about the same as last
year. It was about the same as last year, but the weather was much, much better.
Very nice day for a race. Yep.
Everybody had a good time.
Everybody had a good time. Yes. And we took the leftover fans and we're going to give them away at the expo. So it went really, really well. And I think he's trying to figure out the race falls next year. What was it? It wasn't Father's Day. Was it Father's Day weekend? I think it might fall on, and so he was worried about that. So he's going to explore if we need to, change anything and get back to me. That's the only thing we're double checking on. Upcoming events. Duel is next week. How many of you guys are going?
I'm on a team.
Yay!
Cool.
Yay!
I don't know that I'm excited about it, but I am on a team.
Yep, everything. As far as I know, everything's going really fine. She hasn't. Everything's going okay.
Her registrations are up. I looked before the meeting. Her registrations are up from where they were last year, so that's pretty encouraging.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it again this year, but like Nancy Fisher, my right knee is talking to me, so I think it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
She may need. I will just say to the group, I haven't looked at her volunteer needs. But, if anybody here is available to volunteer, she doesn't need a lot of volunteers for the event, but there might be some opportunity there if anybody's available, but I'm not sure what she needs at this point. So.
Yeah, it's a pretty small needs in terms of volunteer. I think she only needs like 10 people and a van of equipment. It's pretty easy. Pumpkin Ridge is coming up, Carrie.
It is. We're so excited. So Hal and Joe and I met yesterday. It was great to see both of them. And so Joe has graciously agreed to help us with different things. And I know several of you have offered to volunteer, and we're excited about that. So we had a little scare with our permits here a few days ago that it was all around the insurance forms and how the systems use AI to read the format of the documents, and it wasn't verifying automatically, but we're all good. So all of our permits are in. Hal was working on the placement of the porta potties. We all know that with that particular race, that's a very important thing. So he's doing that today. And Joe's going to lead our parking efforts and then help us with some other areas, in addition to, I know, several of you on the call. Currently, we're about 85 registrations ahead of where we were this time last year. It's hard to tell if that is people just being early or if we think that it's the trend of the races being less expensive, which is what I'm hoping. So we're actually, as far as finisher awards and such, we're planning on 500 just to make sure we have enough. And if we have extra, then we've created them so that they are easy giveaways. They don't give the year. So they're easy giveaways then for some of the expos that we participate in. So there was a whole train of thought on that. Susan, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a comment more than anything. I think because we had so many people register to become members so they could do the turkey trot, we have all these new members and now they're getting this email feed that says, hey, we have a race in August. Come and do the race. And I think it's going to bring more people to almost all of our races.
Yeah,
so it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I will share with you. So my takeaway is that Pumpkin Ridge and Shampooey have a similar issue in that we are at a time of year where we do not get the benefit of our school programs where they offer volunteers. It is a very, very challenging volunteer recruitment process. So right now we did have someone that is actually a member of ORRC approach us and say, hey, I'm part of a private school in Hillsboro and we're doing a jogathon and we would love to be able to maybe coordinate. I've done Pumpkin Ridge, but I would love to coordinate and help be volunteers. And is there an opportunity for us to present some information about our jogathon, but then also help with volunteering? Right now, I have a commitment of 18 volunteers from that private school. It's a brand new volunteer group that I think we desperately need. We need to recruit new people into the organization. Now, some of the volunteers are their children that go to this private school. So we'll have them at aid stations with their parents. And I'm working with them right now on the age group so we know where to appropriately place people and where we need to have course marshals that have done that they've either been involved in a race and they're familiar with what happens if you're a course marshal. So we're working through that right now. But the other organization that I'm working with, and I'm not sure if it's going to work out, but I'm talking to them, is Union Gospel Mission. So off of 185th and Rock Creek, right across from Westview High School, there is a facility called Angela's House, and it is a women's and children's housing program where they bring people in that qualify to be in this program. That it's I think it's like a year or more that they go through intense counseling. Some of these women are dealing with addiction issues. Some of them are coming out of a battered home situation. And I reached out to them to see, because I knew that they ran their own event. They just actually had it this last weekend. And I said, hey, is there a way that we can partner? We would love to have some of your residents, if some of the women and children could come over and volunteer, we would love to then help you fundraise for your program. So I'm actually talking to them right now and they're very interested. I'm not sure. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it works out. Maybe it's not this year for next year. But my goal was to try to reach out to some new organizations that we could bring into ORRC that might be able to help the races that struggle with the traditional public school volunteer structure. And I know that Shampooey struggled with spring break and we struggle with summer. So I'm hoping that works out to something long-term for everyone, but I'm excited about that. So we're actually in a really good spot right now. If everybody shows up for volunteering, we're in a very, very good spot for our volunteer for the race. So I'm excited about that. So
awesome.
Yeah, positive, very positive.
Long as I don't have to be lugging those delineators through the parking lot, that's
no, you will not. Joe heard all about that yesterday. I was trying to get Hal to agree that we didn't need 90 of them, that we might be able to do, less, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So it might be that Tracy and Julia, that you might actually help Joe with parking instead of an aid station. I'll let you know. I know you're going to be getting back in town. But
yep.
We'll see where that ends up. So anyways,
cool.
Things are
awesome.
going. Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah.
And after that is Labor Day, the free member run, which is humming right along. We're also slightly ahead of last year and looking forward to where everything's moving along with that one too. So doing good. Okay. That was all I had. Just a reminder, again, we are going to be out of the country for the next week and a half. Carrie's going to be monitoring the president's email. So if you have any questions, I don't think I'm going to have access to email at all. We're going to Costa Rica and I don't know what we're going to have. So I'm sure the hotels have Wi-Fi, but who knows?
So you're gonna put me on there right before you leave so that, because I don't have that so I'm gonna need to set that up, right?
I think what I'm going to do is just forward them to you, volunteer. I'm going to forward it to you.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Forward to, and we already have an out of office message too that says to contact you as well.
Okay.
I don't even know if we need to forward it. Just we have an out of office message that says if you need assistance, contact Carrie at volunteer. Okay. So that way you're not inundated with a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So before we go into executive session, just want to remind everybody our next meeting is August 11th again. And if you have anything you want us to talk about, let me know for the agenda. Again, thank you everybody for attending and for you newbies, our guests, for agreeing to run. I really look forward to continuing to work with you. So at this point, I would ask the guests to leave and only board members remain, and we will then go into executive session. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. Okay, that's yes. Suzanne, is that right? Okay, all right, we're all good. Good. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording. All right, thank you, everybody. We are now out of executive session, and we just have 2 items of business to finish. First, based on Mark Barrett's resignation as Vice President of Race Operations, we need to elect a new Vice President of Race Operations, and Carrie has volunteered to fill that role. So we need a motion to nominate Carrie.
I'll support that motion.
Joel got there first. I will second.
Okay, so Joel made a motion to approve Carrie as VP of Race Operations, and Deb seconded the motion. All in favor of approving Carrie, please raise your hand or say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Anybody opposed? All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Carrie. You're now Vice President of Race Operations. Woohoo! All right. And the second item is with regards to Mark's status on the board, we need a motion.
You can make the motion.
I don't think the president is eligible to make motions, honestly.
I will make a motion. I will make the motion that we remove Mark Barrett from the board of directors effective immediately.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Susan seconds it. All right. So we have a motion and a second to remove Mark Barrett from the board of directors from the Roadrunners Club. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose. Mark.
Mark opposes. All right. Motion passes. So Mark is removed from the board. Thank you all again so much for your tremendous work on everything. And I will adjourn the meeting and see you all in a while after our return from Costa Rica.
Have a great vacation.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy your vacation,
Have fun, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.